Hey gang, this is Jonathan Herron coming at you. Thanks for tuning in. Grab yourself a notebook to take a ton of notes, get some hot caffeine, coffee, something, and relax. Right now, we're about to fill you up with some great practical leadership tips to help your church move forward faster.
Welcome to the Fearless Leaders Podcast, a fresh new voice in church leadership circles. Every week is full of insanely practical leadership training for you and your team as we ask the question, what would you do if you weren't afraid? My name is Megan Cherry, coming to you from the central campus of Life Church, Michigan in the High Five State. With me in the studio is lead pastor of one of the 20 fastest growing churches in America right now, Jonathan Herron.
Hey, Megan. It is so great to be with you and our listeners today. Can you believe we are already halfway through 2019?
I know, right? It feels like just yesterday we were making New Year's resolutions, creating plans, dreaming of new things we wanted to try. And now August is here, vacations are wrapping up, summer's going to be over.
And it'll be back to school time, regular weekly schedules. I mean, I hear ya. I got 5 kids of my own. I got to synchronize all the schedules. And listen, I believe that the fall is one of the best times to quickly reach new people far from God, because people in our communities are getting focused. They're becoming more intentional about their time in the fall, their schedules, and the local church has an opportunity to make a difference in people's lives.
That is why I love this podcast, John. I've seen firsthand the power of a healthy, laser-focused church. In my own life, Christ has made such a difference. We're seeing so many lives being touched and transformed right here in Michigan. And how cool is it that we get to share some of what works and what we're learning with more church leaders?
Yeah, Megan, listen, that's the heartbeat behind the Fearless Leaders podcast. When a leader gets better, the whole church gets better, and heaven gets more crowded. Heading into the fall, I am super excited about Fearless Leaders because we're bulking up our free resources, our online presence with more stuff. We've got a new site that just came out, fearlessleaders.net. We've got a brand new leadership app that should be coming out really soon on Apple and Google, just free video training for church leaders. And now, here's the podcast, right? And we're putting the pedal to the metal by releasing a new leadership podcast every Monday.
We're going weekly, y'all.
Heck yeah, better than coffee. And here's why we're doing it. Listen, I have been in ministry for like 19 years. I think you were, a tadpole when I jumped into ministry. And I've seen so many fads, and fads come and go, seasons come and go, but at the heart of it all, it's about reaching people far from God. And if we're going to reach this generation, a generation that's hungry for truth and hope and passion, but is disinterested in the church, we've got to shake things up. We need men and women who are fearless and bold and courageous to take huge steps of faith. And that's what this is about, giving raw encouragement and practical know-how every single week. So I think it as a privilege. I think it's an honor to pour into more leaders. And every week on this podcast, ask the question, what would you do if you weren't afraid?
I'll tell you who isn't afraid. Today's special guest on the Fearless Leaders podcast.
That was a good segue right there. Listen, the first Monday of every month here on Fearless Leaders, we want to feature an artist or a comedian or a church leader who's absolutely killing it so that we can all learn from their experiences, their best practices. Are you sitting down, Megan?
Yes.
You might want to sit down for this because in the coming weeks, we have some interviews we've already completed with Grammy Award winner Rebecca St. James.
What?
We're going to be sitting down talking to a little-known band called Switchfoot. And I'm just really excited. I'm super excited to learn. Today, episode 8, we're learning from a church leader. He's been flying under the radar, but he is getting things done. I'm excited to introduce to our audience today, Mark Rodriguez.
Mark Rodriguez helped launch Calvary Fellowship down near Miami, Florida in the year 2000, serving first as a worship pastor and then sliding into internal systems as executive pastor. Mark Rodriguez helped make Calvary Fellowship one of the fastest growing churches in America 2 years in a row, according to Outreach Magazine.
2 years in a row, back to back. Couldn't quite three-peat. Kidding, Mark. Listen, I've known Mark for years, first as a youth pastor, and now I get to cheer him on because he just stepped out in faith this past year. Mark and his family launched a fresh new church reaching inner city Miami. The name of the church is amazing, Megan. You ready for this? It's Love Unlimited.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty rad. Love Unlimited. His Instagram feed inspires me every single day. You need to look for Mark Rodriguez. But right now, I want you to grab a notebook, get some bold coffee as I sit down and learn from Mark Rodriguez.
Bro, how are things going? I saw, so you got a movie theater and like redid it?
Yes.
Bro, that's crazy. Tell me about that.
Shoot. It's been crazy. So last year I went over to Nepal, Sri Lanka, India, and as any overseas trip does, it completely wrecked me because I met all these church planters that are risking their lives.
Yeah.
You know, it's illegal in Sri Lanka, and I met this guy who came to Christ, and he's mapped out. He showed me on a piece of paper how he's going to reach 10,000 of his countrymen in the next 10 years, church planting. He's probably going to die. And so when I came back, I'm like, dude, we have money, we have resources, America, we're playing it safe. And so that's what led to us being like, we're going to go reach another city. It does not make financial sense what we're doing at all. And we are woefully understaffed, but we're having a blast.
It sounds very familiar.
Yeah. So I don't know what we're doing, bro. I'm here to learn from you. That's what I'm here for.
Awesome.
Can you talk about how nicely groomed your beard is?
Bro, my first church service is my barber. So I go to the barber every week. And it's pretty cool. It's actually, I started doing that back when I was at Calvary, and I had been working at a church for so long. I had like no relationships with like unchristian people. And dude, it's crazy how like I show up, I get there at 8 o'clock in the morning. So they open the barbershop for me. And then the guys just show up and ask me questions and stuff. And it keeps my beard looking nice too.
You look handsome. You look good, buddy. Your whole family looks good on Instagram.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. When I think of fearless leadership, I think of Mark Rodriguez. He's down in Little Havana, Miami, Florida. How are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great, John. It's great to actually see your face and talk to you. We've been friends back when we were youth pastors. I remember back when everybody was blogging, that's how we met. And it was really cool. It's been really cool following you and seeing everything that God's done in your life. And so I'm excited to be on this talk with you today.
We were so young back then and good looking.
I know, man. I know.
Now I'm old and bald, but you look even better.
I still have hair.
You have hair. You should definitely watch the video bonus content because Mark Rodriguez has the most finely tuned beard. So people are tuning in, church planters, movement leaders, and they're saying, who the heck is Mark Rodriguez? I want you to brag about yourself for just a minute. I know how amazing you are. I want people to be influenced by what God's doing through you. But give us the quick 411. Who are you?
So real quick, I live in Miami. My parents are Cuban immigrants. They came here really young. I was born and raised in this country. And I met my wife here, who's also same background, Cuban immigrant, daughter, born here in the States. And we live in what a lot of people call Little Cuba. You know, and now a lot of other Hispanic groups and nationalities have moved into the city. And so I'm a Miami boy. And a lot of people that know me from the outside, that's when they think of Miami, they think of me. And I was in a band. So back when you were doing comedy, I was in a band. I was the lead singer in a band. So that helps. you know, being a musician and a church planter helps. And so I did worship. Actually, when I started at Calvary, which is how we met, the church that I was at before, I was like the graphic artist and the worship leader, later youth pastor, oversaw missions. I oversaw children's for a little while, not as the children's pastor, but overseeing, you know how that is, the person that was running the ministry. Mm-hmm. About 9 years in to this church plant, I transitioned to executive pastor, mm-hmm. which is what I did for the remaining 8 or 9 years that I was there. So I was blessed to serve in many different capacities and mm-hmm. have different backgrounds, and being a son of immigrants, you know, working hard. You know, I grew up watching my parents work really hard, and that's really helped me in life to be a hard worker.
So Mark Rodriguez, formerly with Calvary, which was one of the 10 fastest growing churches in America. Yeah. So you guys are legit. You're killing it. You and I met in the early 2000s through blogging. I think I was at New Spring. You were at Calvary. And we were swapping ideas. And I finally got to meet you in person was that Disney World?
Yes, in Disney Springs. Yeah.
Come true. And received some top-notch coaching from you and your crew. And then about a year or two ago, I heard that you were being called, or you had the itch to start a church from scratch. So take us into that. You could have just been comfortable as an executive pastor, killing it, one of the fastest growing churches, blah, 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 blah. But God says, no, it's time to do something new. Help us out. How did that happen?
That's funny. We haven't talked about this, and you're kind of telling the story. It's awesome. Well, I knew God had called me to be a preacher when I was young, man. I was a kid, and I really felt the call of God through several different things in my life. My dad being an immigrant and stereotypical Cuban in the 80s was a drug dealer. And so I grew up in a very wealthy home. And when my family finds Jesus, my dad wants to get involved in church, and he's a drug dealer. And the pastor's like, well, there's nowhere for you to serve in the church. But
I'm sorry, I thought you were joking about the drug dealer.
No, this is like straight up.
I apologize. So that's legit.
Straight up legit. Okay. I actually had started going to church by myself on the church bus. I was 8 or 9 years old. Wow. And I had done my first communion, and the priest told me that I had to go to church. That was part of and my parents wouldn't take me. And then I found out about this little Baptist church that had a bus service, and I called the number, and they started picking me up. My parents thought I was crazy initially, but I just started going. And one day my dad, he's running from the law, breaks his leg. And then it's my birthday, and he goes, what do you want for your birthday? Because he had been gone for a couple of days at the hospital and whatnot. He goes, when I come back, I'm going to give you whatever you want. And he physically meant, you want a pony? I'll buy you a pony, you know? And then when he gets home, he's like, what do you want? I go, I want you to go to church with me. And he goes, if that's what you want, that's what you're going to get. But don't ask me for any, Nintendo games or anything like that. That's what you're going to get. And so he goes to church. He hears the gospel. He stands up, walks forward, gives his life to Christ. Still a drug dealer, still addicted to drugs and alcohol. But a couple weeks later, when he tells the pastor, I want to serve, they're like, there's nowhere you can serve in this church. You know, you're not there yet or something. And he's like, but there's some men that go and feed the homeless in Miami. You know, you're a man from the streets. You'll fit right in there. And we went, and he loved it. And then on Sunday, this was on a Saturday, he talks with the guys. I'm there with him. He's like, I want to go back. He's like, oh, we just go every once in a while. He goes, well, then I'm going to go back by myself. And my dad and I, we started cooking and going and preaching the gospel in the streets of Miami my entire childhood. That's how I grew up. My dad would actually share his story in Spanish, and I would translate it to English as a boy. And so fast forward now, 18 years, like you said, amazing church, amazing team, amazing move of God, very comfortable. I was very comfortable as an executive pastor. My wife and I, we started sensing that God was calling us to do something. We started praying, like, what does the rest of our life look like? And we fasted and prayed, and we actually started doing a Bible study through Nehemiah. And it's not like I chose Nehemiah. We're like, hey, let's go through the He Reads Truth and She Reads Truth series. Mm-hmm. And what I loved about it is, as a pastor, we know scripture. We know what to read if we're looking for God or whatever. So we submitted to this for this season, and like, they pick what you read. You know, every day it's like time released. Yeah. And then we're going through Nehemiah now. And Nehemiah, I identified with him because he was comfortable. He was living in the palace. He had the best clothes, ate the best food. He risked dying every day, but he had the life. And yet God was calling him back to the city. You know, he was taking him out of a place of comfort into a place of uncertainty, a place where the reason they had to build the walls is because there was attacks that were happening, you know? And so, man, like, I just felt, you know, I'm like, God, what are you asking me to do? One day I call my wife and I'm praying for Miami. I'm praying for the city, because that's what the Bible study was telling me to do. Pray for the city, pray for the city. I jump on the Metro Rail, which is like a subway in Miami that goes over the city. And I'm praying over Miami. I start walking the streets of Miami. And I realized that the city I grew up in had changed. There's now sky rises, there's families, they're raising kids downtown. It's actually one of the fastest growing communities where young families are moving in. It's crazy. It's this crazy, crazy thing happening. And I'm like, where am I? I didn't recognize the city. And I start looking around, and I'm standing in one of the parking lots where I would preach with my dad. Wow. And my dad, he passed away 10 years ago. And I start crying, man. I'm like, I walked 2 or 3 blocks. I'm standing in front of the church where I got married. And it was there where it kind of all came full circle, that God was calling me to reap the seeds that my family had sown in those streets for many years. But now the city looked different, you know, and it wasn't months later when it actually all came full circle, but it was there where we started praying specifically, God, is this what you're calling us to do? And yeah.
So I hear that. Wow, you're like a modern day Nehemiah. And so I'm curious, we're walking through at my church, Life Church Michigan. I have a staff member who is feeling called to church planting. And so we're sending him out as a church planter. But that's a difficult conversation to have with your senior pastor / boss. Walk us through that, because I think what holds many of our listeners back from being fearless is the fear of rejection or the fear of the unknown in that conversation. So how did you bring up the subject of, hey, I think I'm going to be leaving?
Well, we actually met for lunch, and I shared that, you know, I've been praying, I'm asking God to affirm my calling. I've been here for almost 18 years now. And God, what does the rest of my life look like? Because that's the commitment that I would be making either way. And God reminded me of when he called me when I was a boy, specifically to be a preacher. And I always shared that with Bob. Like when he first asked me to be a worship leader, I'm like, you know, God called me to be a preacher. And remember, I shared that with you, and I had the opportunity to teach. I asked myself, when was I the happiest in ministry, that I really felt like I was killing it, and spiritually, just even like just emotionally, was when I was a youth pastor. And the main reason was because I was teaching every week. I was building up leaders. I was getting dirty, you know, and I loved every phase of my work when I was there. And as executive pastor of a growing church, you kind of lose that touch with the people. It's, you know, I'm working with the staff, dealing with all the, you know, running a business. And I think that's a calling. And I did say that. I'm like, not putting that down, but it wasn't mine. Like God reminded me he didn't call me to sit behind a desk. And that was like a very specific thing. And, you know, and Bob said, that's how the kingdom's built. You know, it obviously wasn't easy for him, wasn't easy for me. But Tim Keller said this at Exponential. I went to Exponential New York in December. And he said, if you're afraid of sending out a pastor to plant a church, you don't believe in the gospel. because, and then he's like, if you're scared of sending out a pastor to plant a church because people are going to leave to help him plant a church, you don't believe in the gospel. You believe that the people are in your church because of you, not because of the gospel. If the gospel brought them, the gospel will bring them back. If the gospel brought that pastor to your church, the gospel will bring another pastor. You know, and the fear, and he's, and I know some of you are scared to send pastors out because money's going to go too. And he said it again. If you're scared of that, because you don't believe in the gospel, you believe that the money's coming in because of you, because of your talent, and not because of the gospel, man. And that really, like, and it made me and my wife commit, like, hey, if anyone ever decides, if God blesses us with a big staff, with a big church, and someone wants to plant a church, it's like, we want to be their biggest champions, regardless of where it is. You know, I live in a city where there's 4 million people. You know, one of the largest churches in our city has 10, 15,000 people. Like, that's not even a drop in the bucket, you know? And if God's calling you to do it, we need to go and we need to do it. And as pastors, we need to believe in the gospel. And it's difficult because we're men, we're human as well. But
wow. So you make the transition plan. You're going to fearlessly step out, launch a church from scratch. Walk us through, what did you do? What was your roadmap? What steps did you take when it comes to fundraising, putting the pieces together, gathering a group?
Well, we launched in like 6 months. So it was pretty quick, or less. I mean, my last day at Calvary was like October 1st of last year. And we launched in February. So that's not even like October, November, December, January, February. So 5 months.
And was there a reason behind the timeline? I'm just curious.
I believe it, you know, I wanted to do it, you know, and I felt called to do it. There was a need. Doors started opening. And there really wasn't a need to wait, you know. You know, there's never a perfect time. There's never, the need was there. The people were there that needed the gospel, and we did it. And so I think I didn't do things traditionally. I think a lot of times we try to institutionalize training, and we try to institutionalize even church planning. And if we look at the model that Jesus set, it was like a work training. You know, it was like he was feeding the hungry, and then talking about that and teaching them, this is why we did it. And so I had my moments where I'm like, man, am I doing things wrong? You know, it's like 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm loading up a car full of food and resources to go feed the homeless in Miami. And, you know, and I prayed. I'm like, God, am I making any mistakes? And I just remembered Jesus, you know, saying, hey, you wanna be fishers of men? Drop your nets, come and follow me, you know? And yeah, I believe in the classroom. I believe in books. I believe in all that. And I did some of that. But a lot of our church planning training of the core team was very hands-on, active, serving, doing. And so what I did is I had an event every month leading up to that. And then we had, at those events, I would talk about the vision. I would share the vision, and we would live the vision out. And people just got it and started supporting. We didn't have any big checks. Like, you know, we didn't start with a huge bank account. We started with a group of people and that believed in the vision. I did more discouraging than encouraging. And I told people, I'm like, are you sure? Like when people said, hey, we want to come, we want to help you plant. I'm like, are you sure? I don't know that we're ever going to have a youth group, that we're going to have like all the bells and whistles. You know, we're probably going to be meeting in different facilities. We're going to the second poorest community in Miami. And so do you understand all this stuff? You know, pray, make sure this is what you want for your family. This is what God wants for you. And, you know, a lot of the people said, yeah, we really feel, what can happen. And, you know, you're definitely not living this because you guys are killing it and you're planting and you're going out and you're stretching your faith. But a lot of times we get so busy in church world that we stop being the church. You know, we're just putting on
the machine. Yeah.
We're putting on this huge production every week.
Yep.
And I think, you know, what a lot of the guys that you work with that are probably listening to this podcast, a lot of times it's discouraging, you know, because there's this big, and this is what I found. And people go like, Mark, like, so what did you do? And I'm like, you know what? I'm working really hard and I'm being me. I can't be Jonathan. I can't be Andy Stanley. I can't be Carl Lentz. I can't be, you know, Ed Young and all these.
You didn't put me in that group of guys, okay? Those.
I can't. I'm who I am, and that's why when you ask me who's Mark, I'm the son of Cuban immigrants that came to Miami. I understand this city. I love this city. It's where I've met my wife. It's where we met Jesus. It's where my kids were born, and that's what I embraced. Was my culture, was what I know. And, you know, so a lot of our stuff is in Spanglish. You know, a lot of the events that we did was just based around our culture. You know, it's based around the Miami culture, and people identified with that, and they followed us. You know, there's a huge Catholic influence in Miami, and what the church has done, churches that I've been involved with in the city, as a kid growing up, is you bash the church, ignore the cultures that the Catholic faith has, and just bash them, you know. And so one of the things we did during Holy Week was that a lot of times, especially here in Miami, I don't know about in other states as much, but it's ignored. Holy Week's ignored. It's Easter, 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 Easter. But for the Catholic, it's a big deal. They don't go to church. They don't even understand how to celebrate it. But there is this like guilt that falls on the Catholic tradition, kids born into the faith, because it's really not practiced that much. You know, it's like funerals, weddings, and, you know, whenever you get dragged to church, and, you know, your communion and stuff like that. And so what we did as a church is that we embraced that. There's nothing wrong with embracing Holy Week, you know? And so I did a series of videos. I don't know if you saw them. They're on YouTube, and there were these 2-minute videos just talking about Holy Week. And we focused on Good Friday. And we just pushed people to Good Friday, because Miami's a party town. I mean, you could go to any restaurant in Miami at 2 o'clock in the morning and it's open. But on Friday, people go out, and they go out late, and they work late, but they still go out. And so we're like, man, Friday's the perfect day to try to reach this group of people. And again, I'm talking about identifying the culture where God has planted you, wherever you are. And so we're like, people already, they're used to going out on Friday. They're used to driving to go somewhere in downtown, in Miami Beach and stuff. And so we just pushed people to Friday. We talked about having Holy Communion, which is what we do, you know. I invited a state senator, a big Catholic guy, to come and pray the Lord's Prayer. So he essentially quoted scripture. There's nothing wrong with that. And we had over 500 people show up to this event. Again, we were like 9 weeks old at the time. And over 100 people gave their life to Christ. We saw people that we had never seen before. One of the first people to come forward to the invitation was this senator that prayed the Lord's Prayer at the event.
What? And his name is Marco Rubio. No.
Yeah. And here's this guy with his eyes like bawling, like, you know, like as a politician, there's this like facade that you put up, and there's this guy, the only person wearing a full suit and a tie at this event, just crying, you know. And so I believe one of the things that has been successful for us is, one, me being me and not pretending to be someone else. And not, you know, I know all the facts about the economy of the community and all this stuff. And but if God is pointing me there, trusting God. You know, I was told by people, like, you don't know what you're doing. You're starting a church in a poor community, you know, and I'm like, so what? You know, who's going to reach them? No one's planning churches here. you know, and I'm like, God owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. I'm not relying on people to fulfill our financial needs, you know, and I thank God that we haven't had a time of drought, and God has provided every step of the way without like some endowment or anything, because we've been obedient. And so, yeah, you want to know the demographics and you want to know, you know, how much money people make. But what's amazing is that we have people driving from some of the most expensive communities in Miami to come to church. And then I have people getting off the bus. This Sunday, they brought in a guy from the street, a homeless guy without shoes, dirty clothes. And I'm looking. And so again, I was in church world for a long time. And so we have this like, and so I see the ushers that were with me the day before feeding people in the street. So Saturday we're feeding homeless, clothing homeless, but now we're at church. And now I see these same guys walking in with a guy that's like dirty and doesn't have shoes. And they sit him in the front row. And I'm like, this guy is going to just distract the service, stand up, walk. And he sits through the service. He comes forward in the invitation. There's a picture of him in our social media. He leaves with a pair of LeBrons that someone was wearing, with a belt, with new clothes, with a cap, one of our Love Unlimited hats. And they drove him to a detox center in Miami after church. And then after, I apologized to the ushers. I'm like, because I was just thinking, like, what the heck are these guys doing? And you know, they came to me and they said, this is what you taught us to do. A year ago, we wouldn't have known what to do. And this is what you taught us to do. It reminds me of the verses that I shared with them. You know, real religion is reaching out to the homeless and the loveless in their plight, where they are, where they're hurting. And, you know, yeah, it's sticky, it's dangerous. But that's what being a fearless leader is. It's having faith and stepping out into the unknown. It's leaving the palace and with a letter from the king, like, don't kill me, you know, give me passage, and then building the wall. And then when people ask you to come down, say, I'm busy right now. I can't come down. You know, I'm doing God's work. And man, we've seen numbers, and it hasn't been our goal to hit big numbers. It's obviously a great thing, but it's like, we're loving people, we're preaching, we're teaching, and you know, we're just doing God's work, and the people are showing up, you know.
Podcast listeners can't see this. This is why you should check out the bonus content online. But Mark is here in tears, and this is real. It reminds me of Jesus's words in Matthew 25. And that's what you guys are doing. And that's so inspiring.
Yeah.
So we've got leaders, church planters tuning in, and they're saying, okay, so how did this get pulled off? Let me throw some stats out. Because what you have led since February of 2019, dude, if nobody's told you you're a success, you're a success. You launched a church from scratch with over 500 people on your launch Sunday. Easter, you had over 800 people. Good golly. Give us some tips. There is, like I said, I think it's the Holy Spirit and hard work. So I don't want to mislead people and say, just pray and feed the hungry. And yeah, we're to do that. But I also believe that God wants us to be wise and use the resources around us. And, you know, I also want people to know my background, my trade is branding and marketing. And so we have like a good brand, a good identity. Brand is more than a logo. And what I shared, what brought me to tears is our brand. That's who we are. I didn't know what we were going to name the church. I had like Miami City Church. If you look at my GoDaddy account, I own so many domains.
because I would just think of a name and I'd buy the domain of the church.
Markschurch.com.
So I have like, you know, Miami City Church, Miami Metro Church, you know, I was just going with like, and, but I always knew this. I knew that Miami is a sinful place. It's known as the party city. A lot of madness happens on our streets. And the Bible promises us that where sin abounds, grace abounds even more, that love covers a multitude of sin. And when I would share the vision with people, I would share these verses without having, oh, what are you going to name the church? I'm not sure yet. Right. And you know, I had this little note thing on my iPhone of all these verses that just talked about love, you know, and in 1 Corinthians 13:7, in a very modern translation, it says that love has no limit to its endurance. And that was like a big thing for me. Like, you know, if we have love, then we can reach the loveless and the hurting. And when I put on my executive pastor hat when I couldn't sleep, and I would just start coming up with, this is how much money we need. These are all the equipment. This is the equipment list, because we've done it so many times, moving from location to location, you know, building buildings and stuff like that. So it became very easy for me to do those spreadsheets and stuff. And then, and so I had all that, and I'm like, yeah, but what is our church going to look like? What are we going to be known for? You know, what does Jesus say that the church should be known for? And, you know, people will know that you're my disciples by the way that you love each other. Not by your buildings, not by your music, not by your messages, not by your sermons. And it's hard to hear as preachers. People will know that you're my followers by the way that you love each other, yet the world doesn't believe us because we don't love each other. You know, and not as much as we should. And so I don't want to bash it, but we don't. And it's all, that's what I wanted to be known for. And so that really changed a lot of stuff. That changed my budgets of things that I thought I had to have that I don't have, and it's okay. We meet in a gym. I wanted black chairs, but white chairs are cheaper, and I got white chairs, you know what I mean? And yep. We don't have all the crazy lights and stuff, and I love all that stuff, and I've designed environments with those things, but I didn't need that to fulfill the vision that God was giving me. And if he gives it to me one day, that's cool, and I'll receive it. And I think that's also, John, I'm sure you see it, like church planners, they want to plant and they feel like they need all these bells and whistles, and you don't need all that stuff. You know, there's things that you do need. You obviously need a PA system and stuff like that. It's not a must. You know, I didn't have an acoustic guitar. I got an acoustic guitar with a hole in it. And so I led worship at a couple of our things with that guitar, and I didn't have any I didn't have a PA system. So we started meeting in the beach and stuff like that, you know, the couple months leading up to the launch. So strategy, social media was huge. You got to know your audience, know who you are. And so we did a good job of posting on social media and taking pictures and showing.
You guys are killing it on social media. You're killing it.
Thanks, man. So we worked hard on that. We didn't do any mailers. No mailers.
Wow.
And one of the main reasons was, like, you know, I'd look at our bank account and I'd look at mailers, and I'm like, if I do mailers, that's like half the bank account.
Yep.
And I'm like, you know, how many people are really looking through their mail? And it's not that I don't believe in it. I just think it's very expensive for the outcome that you get.
Can you give us your social media handles so people can check you out?
At Love Unlimited. We spell Love Unlimited, Luve UNLTD. So it's the abbreviated and the unlimited. And then mine is at Mark Rodriguez. So that's, and then loveunlimited.com is our website.
I've told our staff here at Life Church that they need to follow you because you do kill it with not just your branding, but through photography, telling the story of your church.
Yeah.
So that's an easy way to learn from what Mark's doing in Miami, is just to follow them on social media.
And people don't know, and I think this is what I've learned. The largest church in Miami right now, English speaking, because there's a larger Spanish speaking, is VU with Rich Wilkerson, who's doing an amazing job. I love what they do. We're friends with
Is that for
Voo.
real? Voo?
Yeah, like VOUS.
Okay. Is that a Greek for something then, huh?
No, it's like French for you, but it really came from their. Rich used to have a young adults ministry called Rendezvous, and then they used to when they would talk, they loosely, hey, you're going to VOU, and that stuck. And so
you launched the church out of the young adult ministry. Okay.
Yeah, and they're doing great, man. They're reaching thousands of people, and so that's awesome. But if you talk to people in Miami and you go, hey, have you heard of VOU? And they're like, what is that? You know what I mean? We know, we know all the pastors that are doing great. We know of all the big churches. We know what our churches look like on the inside. But to the world, which is who we need to reach, they have no idea, which is why social media, taking pictures, which is why putting videos up, which is why putting your messages online is great, because it gives people a glimpse of, do I really want to go there? It tears down the barriers. And so we take pictures of the outside, of the people outside. We talk about all the environments. One of the great things in Miami, it's always raining. Remember last time you were here, there was the flood and all that stuff?
Good golly. I flew into Miami and I thought I was going to die.
So we have, and one of the reasons why I chose the building that we're in, one, it's an incredible view of the city that you can see from the windows in this gym, but it has 2 parking garages. And so people can come to church when it rains, so there's a monsoon and your kids aren't going to get wet. And so we tell people that stuff. You got to describe. And so a lot of times our websites are full of all this religious jargon.
Yep.
And it doesn't really talk to the people that are like scrolling through your site and they want to know, like, what is this place about?
Yeah.
I think another thing.
Will I be rejected? Will I?
Exactly. And there's so many people that come to the church that have come because of the videos that they've seen on Instagram. I did probably 2 months leading up to the launch, I started doing a Sunday morning service on YouTube. It was a 15-minute service. I would teach, and then there would be worship at the end.
Wow.
And there's a bunch of people that came to the church because they saw one of our ads. And if you're a church planner, you still haven't had service. But so I did these 8 videos, and people were able to hear me speak. They were able to hear what the music was like. They saw how we're dressed. They saw what we look like. And they're like, oh, wow, this isn't anything that I'm not going to understand. And I told my stories. I introduced them to my family and stuff like that. And so that was very helpful. So social media, YouTube, I even feel like social media is more important than your website nowadays. When you meet someone now, you go to a conference or you meet someone at a coffee shop, what do? You don't ask them for their phone number. You ask them for their Instagram account.
Yep. Which
is one of the convincing factors for me, is that it was okay that I didn't do any direct mail, because I couldn't afford it. So instead I spent, $700 on Instagram ads to promote, instead of spending $3,000, $4,000. Some church planning organizations, they encourage you to spend $10,000 on mailers. Mm-hmm. And in Miami, that's just not going to do much. There's so many people. Young people don't check the mail. I'm paperless. My mailman hates me because I check the mail once every 5-10 days, because it's all advertising, So
that's right. So in the remaining few moments we have, I want to ask you about what does count to younger generations, which is music, the importance of worship. You are a recovering worship pastor.
I am.
And I'm going to bring in here my buddy Brennan, who a year ago right now came to our church. We threw him up on stage and we found out he could play guitar because we're hurting for guitarists. He became an intern. Get over here, Brennan. And
hey, what's up, man?
Now he's a worship associate. And what I love about Brennan, if I can brag about it for just 1 second, is he doesn't have any church experience. So there's nobody in his brain saying we have to do it this way. He's fresh. So as an amazing worship guy, speak to Brennan, speak to our listeners. What are some pro tips you would give for leading worship in a church plant, in a growing church? Give it to us.
First of all, is you got to understand who you're singing to. And you're singing to God, obviously, but who's in the audience? It's not normal for regular people to show up somewhere and start singing songs. And so that can be discouraging sometimes. If you're reaching the lost, they're not going to know the songs. They're not going to know to clap. But they'll probably be some of the most engaged people. And so I would just encourage you to worship as you're leading in worship. And people are going to see you worship and be like, oh, that's what I need to do. And so I think that a lot of times worship leaders, because we come from, a performance background, they focus so much on performance and they don't realize that we are being an image, an example to the people in front of us. Hey, he's closing his eyes, he's raising his hands. Feel free, if you're playing guitar, man, to raise your hands, bro, and let people know that let's raise our hands, let's worship Jesus, and tell them why we're doing it. And so I find myself when I lead worship every once in a while at the church, and I find myself explaining, hey, this is why we do this, and it's okay. And so it's almost we go to church to learn. And yet the one place that we don't teach is in worship. And that's what we're going to do forever, is worship. And so not that you're going to teach a sermon. And I think sometimes that there's that issue too, that guys over talk. I would not let the Holy Spirit flow. Worship mentor one day told me this, and I'll share two things that I was taught by two different guys. One is, when you talk too much, people stop looking at God and now they're looking at you. And so that's, as a worship leader, keep that in mind. Don't overtalk. The other thing is that the songs need to mean something to us first before we can sing them. And so when I was very young, I was like 14, 15 years old as a young worship leader, my worship pastor told me, learn to pray your songs and sing your prayers. And it was the weirdest thing when I'm sitting with this, a teenager, 16, 15 years old, your peers are around you, and it's like, okay, Mark, sing your prayer. And I'm like, Jesus, so do it by yourself or whatever. That also helps in songwriting. But really the praying your songs is a big thing. And as a worship leader, I did that with my team. And once these songs, you internalize them, man, when you interpret them, when you sing them, people will see that it's real and that you're not just rocking out, So yeah. I don't know if you have any specific questions. That's
good.
Caught me off guard there.
So we'll probably end the interview there because that was a good quote. But I'd love to, dude, that's good stuff. And this didn't hit me until I was talking to you. We should probably set up one or two little video things with you and Brennan. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Just take a little bit of coaching on that, because Mark's a guy I trust, and he's absolutely killing it.
And I think it's great that you don't have a background. I love people that don't have backgrounds, because guys like us, we get tainted along the way.
Yeah, we get tainted. Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So
cool, man. I've got a ton of content now to play with.
All right, bro. Well, thank you, man. And I'm proud of you, man.
No, dude, I'm excited about what you guys are doing.
So
our name of our church now to Life Unlimited.
I like it. Life,
because that's legit what you're doing.
Yeah. Thanks, bro.
We are so thankful for our listeners and also our viewers over on youtube.com/fearless leadership. Would you do us a small favor? If today's podcast helped you or encouraged you in any way, would you take 60 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts? It may sound silly, but every 5-star review increases our visibility on podcast rankings and helps get fearless leaders in front of more eyeballs to help and inspire more leaders.
Absolutely. And as always, if we can encourage or help your team fearlessly move forward, drop us a line, fearlessleaders.net, or over on social media at High Five John. That's at High Five JON.
We're back next week unpacking how to launch a fast-growing church from scratch. Plus, we will have news on a new leadership book coming from Jonathan Herron. So subscribe on Apple, Google, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you listen, and we'll see you again next Monday for another episode of Fearless Leaders.
Enjoy your burrito.
Hey gang, this is Jonathan Herron here, encouraging you to fearlessly lead your church toward growth. Listen, when a leader gets better, everyone gets better, and my heartbeat is to just share with movement leaders like yourself, church planters, the stuff that we've learned here at Life Church Michigan. We release free leadership 60-second videos Mondays through Wednesdays on all the social media channels for @High5John. That's @High5JON. But if you want to go even further, if we can help you with planning ahead, staffing, leadership development, coaching, then head over to jonathanherron.com for our new All Access package. At All Access, you're going to get some really great leadership materials, including my book, Holy Shift, using principles of improv comedy to help your church go further, faster. Because you're a fearless leader, of course, we're going to send you the Fearless t-shirt, but you're going to have twice a month live online access and leadership coaching with me and connecting with other church leaders and planters from across the country. We'll also share with you all of our documents, all of our systems, strategies, how to do an Easter egg helicopter drop, videos you can take logos off, slap yours on. We just want to help you. So head over to jonathanherron.com. There's tons of materials there to help you fearlessly lead your church to growth.